The next AI advantage may not come from having the smartest model. It may come from not being trapped by one. That sounds boring until the bill shows up, until your customer data becomes a legal problem, until your entire product depends on a vendor changing prices, limits, or terms. This is why open models are becoming a business weapon, not because every company wants to become an AI lab, because every serious company wants options. This is educational content. It is not career, legal, or financial advice. Most people talk about open models like a nerd debate. Open source versus closed source. Benchmarks versus benchmarks. That misses the business point. The real question is, who controls the system after AI becomes part of the workflow? If a company builds its support system, sales research, document analysis, coding workflow, and internal search on one outside model, it did not just buy software, it accepted a dependency. Maybe that dependency is worth it. Sometimes the frontier model is the right call. But when a task becomes repeatable, predictable, and high volume, the math changes. Now, cost matters, latency matters, privacy matters, customization matters. And the company starts asking a very different question. Do we need the absolute smartest model for this job, or do we need a model we can control? That question is where open models become dangerous. Open models give companies a second path. They can test internally. They can tune around their own workflow. They can run smaller models for boring, repeatable tasks. They can keep sensitive data closer to home. And most importantly, they can negotiate. Here's a simple example. A customer support team might use a frontier model to handle messy escalations. But the same team does not need the most expensive model on earth to tag tickets, summarize routine conversations, route refunds, or detect repeated complaints. Those jobs are high volume. They are measurable. They have patterns. That is exactly where a smaller open model can become strategic. Not glamorous, profitable. The company gets lower cost, more control, and less dependence. And the frontier model stays available for the work that actually needs frontier intelligence. This is the part people miss. Even if a company still uses a frontier API, open models change the conversation. A vendor has less power when the customer has a credible alternative. That alternative does not have to be perfect. It just has to be good enough for part of the workload. Think of it like cloud infrastructure. The biggest companies do not pick tools because they love one logo. They pick architectures that reduce single points of failure. Open models are becoming part of that architecture. They are not replacing everything. They are giving companies leverage over the parts that should never have been locked up in the first place. Now, here's the part the hype crowd skips. Open does not automatically mean better. Open means more control and more responsibility. You may need infrastructure, you may need evaluation, you may need security review, you may need people who understand model behavior, data risk, and deployment cost. That is why this becomes a business weapon instead of a free lunch. The advantage goes to teams that know which problems deserve a frontier model and which problems just need a reliable machine doing repeatable work. If you use the strongest model for everything, you may be overpaying. If you use a smaller model for everything, you may be underperforming. The strategy is not open versus closed. The strategy is knowing where each one belongs. That is a skill, and companies are going to pay for it. This is also why open models matter to startups. A startup does not always win by having the biggest model. It wins by building a product that is cheaper to run, faster to customize, and harder for a bigger competitor to copy. If every feature depends on the same expensive API, the business may look impressive and still have weak margins. But if the startup knows which parts can run on smaller models, which parts need retrieval, which parts need human review, and which parts need a frontier model, the economics change. That is not just engineering. That is strategy. The model choice becomes part of the business model. The smartest companies will not have one AI model. They will have a portfolio. Frontier models for the hardest reasoning, creative, and ambiguous work. Open or smaller models for repeatable classification, extraction, routing, summarization, internal search, and narrow agents. Human review where judgment matters, automation where the cost of mistakes is low. That is the real AI stack. Not a magic chatbot sitting on top of the company, a layered system where each task gets the cheapest model that can do the job reliably. That is where margins improve. That is where speed improves. That is where companies stop treating AI like a demo and start treating it like infrastructure. And once AI becomes infrastructure, control becomes strategy. So if you are trying to build leverage, do this. First, learn to separate model quality from workflow fit. A model can be impressive and still be wrong for the job. Second, learn the cost profile of a task. How often does it run? How expensive is a mistake? How sensitive is the data? How fast does the answer need to be? Third, learn evaluation. Not vibes, actual tests. Can this model do the task reliably across messy real examples? Fourth, learn deployment trade-offs. API, hosted open model, local model, hybrid system. Each one has a place. The person who understands those trade-offs becomes valuable because they are not selling hype. They are designing leverage. Here's the career angle. If you are learning AI right now, do not only learn prompts, learn model selection, learn evaluation, learn data handling, Learn what makes a workflow expensive. Learn what makes a workflow risky. Learn when a simple model is enough and when the expensive model is justified. That is the difference between someone who plays with AI tools and someone who can help a business make decisions. The second person has leverage. The second person gets invited into strategy conversations because they can translate model choices into cost, speed, risk, and control. Open models are becoming a business weapon because they change power. They give companies options. They reduce dependence. They turn AI from a product you rent into infrastructure you can shape. The winners will not blindly worship open models, and they will not blindly worship closed models. They will know when to use each. Subscribe for more practical AI strategy, AI tools, and real-world automation breakdowns, and I will see you in the next one.